the way I've heard it referenced all often is when something successful happens to me. So it's like, NBA player signs a huge contract and it's like God's plan.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact that you're 6'11" and can shoot 3-pointers and
Of course.
Yeah.
And have spent the majority of your life learning how to do this.
right.
All right. Well, welcome to Sunday Plus, episode 6.
Episode 6.
So we officially started the new worship series, Making Miracles.
Making miracles. We can do it. We can do it. We've been given the power.
We have been given the power. So what was the original inspiration behind why choose this?
Kind of in the flow of how Dream Out sermon series, there's usually something about invitation, and that was our stewardship series of inviting people to this life of Christ.
There's that word
Jesus
again.
pieces. Sorry, Stuart. About the life of Christ that we commit ourselves to. And then exploration sermon series are always meant to try and get us outside of the box a little bit. And so sometimes it's like deep, heady stuff, or sometimes it's like obscure scripture stuff. But this one, as a church, I feel like we need to recommit ourselves to the missional aspect of our church to get outside of our walls.
I can get down with that.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of great mission partners we've worked with. We have lots of people who are engaged in things, but it hasn't really been a core focus for us since 2020. There was a lot of insular,
So was it the pandemic that kind of worked its way in and changed the course?
Yeah, it really. It was survival mode. It was figuring things out mode. It was we just got to get back in mode. And a lot of our the elementary school we worked with, we all of a sudden we used to have 60 people go mentor and read to elementary school kids.
Wow.
Or help them with homework.
Like
or
across
something.
the street?
No, like in Princeton.
Oh, in Princeton.
I mean,
it was
a commitment. They did a great job, and then all of a sudden we couldn't get in anymore. So that ministry went to more of a how do we support the teachers from the outside. And so we have 3 or 4 people that go every month, twice a month, and they support the teachers. The teachers know them. They know all the teachers, but the rank and file members of the church who need to be active don't have an opportunity. So we're kind of switching things around to get those people more active in McKinney schools, working with the Samaritan Inn, helping out with that open door program, that's a huge thing still. And then also looking at partnering with a free medical clinic in downtown McKinney, as well as trying to get back into building houses with Habitat. So, yeah.
Man, we have a lot of things in the docket ready to go.
A lot of things, but like I said, I mean, we did a really great job of building up youth ministry, adult ministry, the groups and the internal focus. We did a really great job on. Yeah. Now it's time to really push out and see what we can do as a church mission wise.
Now, of all those things you just listed, is there one that particularly speaks to you? That you're like, man, if I could just be plugged into one of these, that's my jam.
I think personally what I love to do, I love the building aspects, but
I knew it, the Habitat.
I mean, making something and actually seeing completion is pretty awesome, but two, I guess the open door community is
really cool.
It is amazing to be a part of.
I've been slowly but surely attending more and more and realizing just how meaningful being a part of Open Door is. And my dad, when he saw some pictures and some footage of me doing the Christmas sing-along thing, and my dad was like, when it's all said and done, that's the stuff you're going to remember.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's heavy, and I think he's right. I just absolutely love being a part of that.
It is one of those nights, and you may have had a hard day, a long day, don't want to come, and by the end of the 2 hours, you're so glad you did, and the parents are so appreciative. The guests have a great time. I think from a philosophy standpoint, the Samaritan Inn I just am deeply passionate about. What can we do as a church to lift somebody up as opposed to just hand something to them and keep them in their, make them dependent?
Yeah, we were talking about that last night during the very boring Super Bowl. Very one-sided the entire time.
Yes.
We were talking about
sorry to the Chiefs fans.
The notion,
there.
Yes, sorry. The notion of not giving somebody T-shirts and shoes, the whole Tom's thing. because there was somebody mentioned what happens to, because they always have for games like a game, if any NBA Game 7 or a Super Bowl, they have hats and shirts made for both outcomes,
like hundreds
ready
of
to
them.
go.
Yeah.
And so somebody's like, what happens to those? I'm like, we typically send them off to like third world countries,
Right.
Mexico, somewhere in Africa, and you will find pictures of piles of, championship hats of a team that didn't win the championship, and shirts and whatnot, or piles of Tom's shoes and stuff. And so then it led into another part of the conversation. Well, what should we do for those? And like, give them an opportunity to build their own thing.
Yeah,
let them have a functioning society rather than a bunch of handouts or things that we don't want.
Right.
And it was mentioned that's why food banks don't actually want your old, almost expired or just expired canned goods. They want money so they can buy real food. The same things that we would want.
Right, like healthy stuff. That's actually going to help them long term in terms of illnesses and their body. That's what I love about like ACO has gone back to, I think they call it dignity shopping. And instead of you going through a line and them handing you a bag of something you didn't choose, they've got the food stock and you get to go and you actually pick out your items up to a certain extent. It was real. So you mentioned the like Super Bowl winner shirts.
Yeah.
There was a really great Sports Center item around the year that the Giants beat the Patriots, and the Patriots could have been undefeated throughout the season.
The 17-0 Patriots got beaten by the wild card
Giants.
Oh.
So the next year, I think it was the year after, they were like around Super Bowl time, the lead up Super Bowl time. They had sent a crew over, and there was like a village in, I think, Nigeria or Liberia, and I can't remember which one it was. And they was like, the biggest Patriot fans you'll find, because literally all like 300 of these hats, jerseys, and everything made its way to this one village. So everybody's walking around in Patriots gear the entire time, and it's like undefeated, stuff. And they were talking about how like most of the people didn't even know who the Patriots were. It was just a shirt. But like I've been in and it's kind of this like kind of funny, cute story. But I do think there's something about like there's an organization called Zoe Helps. ACO does it well. The Samaritan Inn does it well, where someone comes in and there is a program that they're a part of. But as part of the program, they say, "What do you want?"
Yeah.
And then we're going to help you achieve what you want. So then you've got buy-in, you've got skin in the game, and it's not just we have people that come to the church. And it's, I need help with rent.
Right.
And of course, we're compassionate and we usually try and help out where we can. And we have a fund for that. And then 3 months later, they come back. And then 3 months later, they come back.
Right.
And granted, it's hard to afford rent in some places. And it's not easy to get out of poverty, and especially in Collin County. But the dependence it creates is
there's that
toxic.
There's that dependence. And I think most churches that I've worked at have that same kind of program where it's like, hey, we're going to help out. We're going to help out a family who is struggling to pay their bills. But the notion is it's not just going to be you need help. How much? Here's money. Mm-hmm. It's, we're going to get to know you. We need to understand your situation because we want to put you in contact with somebody who can help. Mm-hmm. And that to me makes way more sense. And that's part of what the Samaritan Inn does that I learned about when I was there, was that they are interviewing, going through very extensive interview process to try and figure out, we need to get you out of this cycle so that you can be self-sufficient,
right?
Self-reliant. So you have a job, so you can afford to pay your bills. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to be perfect from then on. It's still going to be an uphill battle, but it's your own power that you're under rather than the reliance of needing to come back to a place over and over for financial aid.
That's what that's what I mentioned in the sermon. I appreciate about Jesus just being like, get your mat and walk.
Yeah.
And there's other great stories about the friends who carry, I think it's in Matthew or Mark, where the friends carry the guy down through the roof to see Jesus.
The paraplegic.
The paraplegic. So he's got friends who are doing the work for him for a little while, but still, after Jesus says your sins are forgiven, he says, all right, get your mat and go. And it's this idea of healing in which, like, when I read through the Gospel of John or most of the Gospels, I don't think Jesus ever really intended for there just to be this huge caravan of people following him his entire life. It was always meant to be this, I'm going to transmit something to you so that you can go out and do more than I ever did. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were talking about the story of this guy, and one of the things that was, it almost felt like a throwaway line at the end of that scripture. It was like, and Jesus healed him, and it was on the Sabbath.
It was on the Sabbath, yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of talk about the idea of how big of a deal the Sabbath was back then and how not big of a deal it is now.
Right, yeah. Well, and if you go forward from that story, there's a whole debate where the Pharisees go track this guy down. And there's another story where they track another guy down who's been healed on the Sabbath. And they're like, aren't you ashamed that you were healed on the Sabbath? Like, isn't this a terrible thing? And like the guy in John 9, we'll talk about this next week, is like, look, all I know is before I couldn't see and now I can. And I'm pretty happy about that. Like, it doesn't matter when it was.
That's a pretty good change right there.
Yeah, so definitely the Sabbath. I mean, it is unreal the amount of so the laws in the Old Testament around the Sabbath of keeping it holy and making sure that you are not overworking and you are, and what Jesus says is the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Right.
And so there is this. I think maybe people were overworking still, or maybe people were disrespecting
Jesus
it.
Asked, "Is the Sabbath made for the?"
Yeah, that's true.
That's a typical Jesus thing to not actually give you a firm directive, but pose a question with a clear and obvious, this is what I'm meaning over here,
right.
But I'm going to let you figure it out.
And there's a whole tradition because there's all these laws about what you can and cannot do on the Sabbath in the Bible. And then there's this post-Bible, like extra biblical strict Judaism, like Orthodox Jewish.
The Talmud?
There's Talmud. Yeah, there's the Mishnah. All these rabbis who have been arguing about it.
It's a huge book.
Yeah.
And apparently it's just all rules.
Well, it's interesting because they've got like a little piece of Torah, and then they'll have like a rabbi's interpretation of it, and then they'll have another rabbi's arguing with the first rabbi, and it literally just builds out. So it's wild to see. So like, and I love this about Judaism is that they are not afraid to hide their arguing. And they literally
it's a book of
they've literally documented it and keep it as a sacred text. So but so and I see this, I actually see this in the development of like Deuteronomy. It's like this happened, it's not covered by the rules yet. So what's the new rule? And we're going to put that in there. And then it builds up into whatever the 616 we have or 612 in the Old Testament. And then there's all these other ones about how many steps you can take.
That is bananas.
It's a big deal. I mean, that's when they're saying you're healing on the Sabbath, they believe that Jesus is dishonoring God by doing medicinal work on the weekend, which what does your weekend look like, John? Because mine was slams. Like,
I cannot. Okay, so with all of that, was there a clear and defined shift from the Sabbath being so important to whatever it is now?
Yeah.
Where no one cares.
It's interesting. I think that's the shift away from Sabbath is actually a really modern thing. It
feels like something that would have happened in the last like 200 or 300 years.
It was really 1970s and 80s because
2 decades. Never mind. Wow.
So think about youth sports is the one that everybody brings up.
Sure.
We've got baseball, swim, tennis, band, whatever
soccer
tournaments,
games on Sunday. That is unbiblical.
So everything used to blue laws. You couldn't buy certain things on Sunday in Texas or Alabama or in the South.
Well, you still can't buy alcohol or
before noon, right?
No, it's on Sundays. Liquor stores are closed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is still a thing in the state of Texas.
Somewhere I remember it was you can't.
That might be America, actually. I don't know because I don't think I've been able to ever buy I don't think liquor stores are ever open on Sundays.
Okay, well I know
in Texas they're not.
In Massachusetts, I remember up there with Lindsay when she was living up there, and there was a liquor store that was Sunday, and it was like we open at noon.
Okay,
so it was like church gets
alcohol
done.
Sales at noon on Sunday is still a thing.
Okay,
but liquor stores are just straight up not closed or open in Texas on Sundays.
I find it interesting.
So apparently in Massachusetts, it's just afternoon.
Well, it's just one of those things of all right, I see why. Like, I see what people are trying to do with the rule. Okay, we just don't want you to get drunk while you're at church. Afterward, go for it. It's just dumb.
That's definitely how that works, and that's how you're going to stop it.
But it used to be, I mean, like through the medieval ages, through early American Puritanism, and we could maybe talk about other places in the world in a different timeline, but certainly in the United States, it was still Sunday specific, Wednesday specific. You didn't schedule anything. Things weren't open. And somewhere around the 1960s, 70s, around some of the deconstruction of, questioning things in the hippie movement. Some of those great questions, some of them maybe bad questions, but in that was people didn't trust institutions anymore. The government had lied to them, failed them in certain levels. The church had done so, and they started asking more questions. And one of those questions was, well, why can't we do things on Sunday? What's weird is schools, at least in this area, still try to not do things on Wednesday nights. So Wednesday night is still pretty kind of off limits, more than Sunday morning.
Interesting.
Because Sunday morning is when you can get a baseball field and you can get volleyball rent gym space, and it became it's more of a money grab. We have an opportunity to expand our leagues and our club sports and our band competitions and everything. So we can make more money that way by expanding. And then people start creating field space for that. And also, it's a huge industry.
The things that church has, kind of been a wrench in as far as weekly structure. I find that just so interesting. And it's changed even in our lifetime, just the shift of how much people will respect the Sunday mantra of this is what you do on Sunday. And it's just completely different now. Now, COVID accelerated that, but my goodness.
When I get the right, I'm in both camps. I see where God is supposed to infuse in our entire existence, and so you can do that any day of the week at any time. It's not given to a one period. I think what's important about what the Sabbath was meant to be is, like, I have people who are like, yeah, we're on a Christian soccer team because we pray after the game. Well, we're also killing ourselves to get to 5 different tournaments every weekend, and we don't have any family time and all sorts of other things that go on.
Right.
And okay, we prayed over by the end. What do you think they're praying for? Thank you that we didn't get hurt. Thank you that we won. What does that prayer look like versus people carving out a distinct time to come and worship and pour themselves out and receive? I think that's what Sabbath was supposed to be, is you are not made just for what you produce. You are made for God and to be loved and to love. And
so a couple of things on the Sabbath. One, I've always found it so interesting that when you look at the 10 Commandments, Sabbath is on there. This is a list that literally is like, don't kill people. Love God, most important thing. Maybe don't sleep with your neighbor's wife.
Right. Don't steal their stuff.
Don't steal things. Also, take a day.
Take a day. Yeah, take a break.
It's such an interesting thing that's on the same list, and yet it's one thing that I would, without any hesitation, say that every Christian I know is like, oh, I break that all the time. Most weeks, and if not all weeks.
I can't remember if it was Brian McLaren or Adam Hamilton or Rob Bell. One of them, maybe Jen Hatmaker, was like, it's not only that we break it, it's that you'll be celebrated for breaking it. Because I would guarantee anybody listening here, if their boss found out that they were doing extra work on Sunday, they would get a raise and a promotion.
Yeah.
Because they're committed to the company. If you are a club sport parent, or, if you basically, the more you do, the more you're going to be celebrated. So it's literally the commandment that are celebrated to break.
It is such a wild thing that the scripture puts so much value on it that it's on the list. Yeah. If there was ever a hierarchy of rules,
right,
it's the 10 Commandments.
Here are the general rules that matter. Yeah.
And that's on that list, and yet we break it probably more than anything.
Yeah.
I think it's, for a while there, I was taking Sabbath very seriously. And
Good.
Saturday was my Sabbath. And so I said, I do not work on Saturdays. And if there was an event at the church, I I'm sorry. Like, I don't do that. Now, I eventually softened my stance and I said, well, I'll just shift my Sabbath.
Right.
Because the point of Sabbath is more important than the functional exact rule following of it. Thus, Sabbath, man, Sabbath, whatever. But one of the other things about the Sabbath that I loved is I heard a quote, and I believe it was from a rabbi, and it was very simple, but it said, "A man who works with his hands Sabbaths with his mind. A man who works with his mind Sabbaths with his hands."
Oh, interesting.
So if you are somebody who, let's say, is in finance, and you are taking your Sabbath, you do something like, well, I'm going to do woodworking.
Yeah, or gardening or something.
Or gardening, something that to get my hands dirty. But if you are a construction worker or whatever, you do something that is cerebral. You read or you pick up art of some kind. You something that works your brain differently. And so that's been one of my favorite things that I've leaned into. And so I started to try and pick up intentionally on my Sabbath back when I was very aggressive about following it. I started picking up new hobbies, so to speak, that challenge different parts of my brain or my hands. And it's one of the reasons why I feel like I have all these little things that I'm good at because I was very intentional about my Sabbath. So
I think that's brilliant because so many people, I think one of the reasons why Sabbath doesn't get followed is everyone thinks you have to like sit around in like silence and do nothing. Absolutely.
And just contemplate the Lord.
Right. Like, but it's just an intentional time of renewal and restoration, which, so like for me, it's, I'm going to make sure that I go shoot baskets every now and then. Like it's something that is, it's fulfilling. And I think I think there needs to be some aspect of connecting with God. Like I think that the worship part is important, but I do think there are activities that connect. Like there are people who, I hate gardening with a passion, but there are people who get out there and their like hands are in the dirt and they feel connected.
My mom is like that. She loves gardening.
So I think, and even the woodworking you mentioned, like there's this creative ability that we have that connects people and they don't know they're connecting with God, but they're connecting with that image of creativity that God gave us. So I think that's what I probably need to do a better job as a preacher, but like the idea that Sabbath is boring, it's not supposed to be boring. It's just supposed to reconnect you. It's to recenter you. Yeah.
It's a battery charger. And what charges your battery? For me, the first thing that I really leaned into was cooking. And that was very recharging, regenerating for me. Is I'm gonna really focus in on learning how to cook this, and then once I feel like I've mastered this, now I'll learn how to cook this, and then this, and then this. And so it's a never ending journey, but that was my recharging thing. It was very cathartic for me to learn how to work with food and understand that process better.
No, I could see that. I wish I were good at cooking.
I think anybody can be. I really do.
I'm not bad if I've got a recipe. The thing that I've always wanted to do was like know the chemistry of cooking.
I'll give you. There's a book.
You got a book? Okay. Because it's like I don't understand. I take flour, I take baking soda, I take baking powder, I do this other thing, I put them all in a bowl in certain quantities, and all of a sudden bread happens or cookies. And
that's baking. So baking and cooking are very different.
Yes.
And I would say that there are people that can do both, but they are very different skill sets.
Yeah.
I myself hate baking because baking to me is it's very basic in some cases. It's just chemistry, and it's all, which also means you have to be very specific.
You have to be very precise. Yeah.
And if you put too much or too little of something, it's just ruined, and in many cases, and it's unedible. Where stovetop cooking, everything is this artistic. It's lean into more of this flavor or this flavor, and you can correct most mistakes. Some you can't. I mean, once you've oversalted something, you can't really undo that. But stuff like that. So they're very different.
Yeah.
But baking, I also think it's less intimidating to get into from the front end. And find success, where cooking, like big pasta dishes, or learning how to perfectly cook a steak, or smoked chicken or something like that, that can be a little more intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it.
I mean, there's usually no food poisoning involved in baking brownies.
That is true.
Versus,
you're not so worried about
salmonella from the chicken is.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, but you got to make mistakes to learn.
Absolutely.
So speaking of like food,
Yeah.
why is that always milk and honey? Where did that come from?
So it's really, I had no idea. I was always kind of why is there land flowing milk and honey?
The land of milk and honey.
So I'm trying to remember now, but when we were in Israel and we were in Jericho, there's this area where they think that Jesus was tempted by the devil. And it's that story where there's like, I'm offering you power, I'm offering all this stuff. Well, if you look down from there, there's this like lush valley, and the honey is the bees would come because there were flowers there. So and the milk is from the cows that would graze and all. So it's going from the literal wilderness of the desert of Egypt, crossing through the Sinai Peninsula, and then all of a sudden there's this oasis of lushness. So there's flowers the bees are attracted to, so you're going to get honey out of that. There's grass enough to graze from cows and all. So it was interesting because there's this one little oasis spot, but our guide was pointing out how when the devil is offering all of this food and all of this comfort, that Jesus can actually look down into this lush valley and see the land flowing with milk and honey. So it's less about specific type of food and more about that there are actually creatures and animals and life there to live off of. Another interesting weird tidbit, there are all these mosaics in Israel and Jordan that have like giraffes and lions. And there was, I can't remember some event, but basically and there used to be all these trees. So like they mentioned the cedars of Lebanon and the temple is built out of. So way back when, that area used to be somewhat forested and like savanna like you think of the savannas of Africa. And basically over commercialization and the lifestyle that was led and some kind of thing changed the entire.
It ran all those animals out.
All the animals left, and it changed the entire ecosystem of the Middle East to be more of this actual deserty plain. It was wild because it's not as deserty over in Israel as you think it is, and like Tel Aviv is beautiful, but apparently it used to be this very lush savanna, and humans ruined it essentially.
That tracks.
Yeah,
we're good at that.
We are very good at that. Yeah.
Like, hey, this looks really pretty. I want to be here, but so does everybody else. So let's destroy it in the process of getting to live in it.
Right. Yeah. We've got like bobcats and coyotes that have found their way into our very densely populated neighborhood. And there was always this kind of like, what are they doing here? And I was like, well, they probably lived here first.
They were here first.
They're just coming back to their home.
Yeah. My goodness. All right. So we're going to be talking about this for the next few weeks, but I wanted to kind of at least launch this episode and bring it up and kind of get your take on this. But the whole notion of miracles, and we talked some about it. I brought it up talking about what does a miracle look like, but because I really was thinking about it on Saturday, I was like, man, miracle. What does a miracle look like? Specifically today, because it's easy to look back and think of all those instances of what Jesus did, but I wanted to kind of get your 10,000 feet take. What does a miracle look like in 2025?
Yeah, it's a great question because the answer is pretty amorphous, and there's the kind of standard definition of it, something that breaks the laws of nature and breaks the laws of science.
Is that like dictionary
textbook? That's
like
dictionary, but what's interesting about that, so like Andy Stanley has this whole series on miracles, and he talks about all the things we label as miracles are not miracles. They're just fortuitous circumstances. When you, like for example, you brought up, I get in a car wreck and I walk away.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some breaking of the laws of nature if the force, the mass times acceleration should have smashed the car, and so maybe there's a miracle that you walked away. But even when people look at their kids and say that's a miracle, On some level, it is. It's amazing that kids are I mean, the process of life itself is a miracle, but it happens millions of times a year.
Yeah.
So I think I have come to understand miracles not just from the breaking the laws of science and nature, but miracles as something that feels improbable and yet comes to fruition. And so it's
I don't hate that at all.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but it's improbable. And when you like your example was really great around, I don't go to Walmart or Target and people just break out into song together. Like that isn't, it's not like a Broadway play.
Yeah.
It would be cool if it was. But we all gather together. Most of the people that gather probably don't sing throughout the week.
They do not. I have asked a lot of them.
Yeah.
How often do you actually sing outside of Sunday morning?
But we get together and all these people who don't sing throughout the week, and it sounds amazing. And I think that's improbable that would ever happen, but it sounds beautiful. It is. I'm trying to think of another example, but I do think that we can look at an understanding of, if God is the one who can make actual miracles happen, we are capable of making improbable things happen because of the Spirit God has put within us. And so when we look at, even our missions, right? It is very improbable in our area that if someone is priced out of rent, or they have huge medical debt or something, or they make a terrible choice, that they have the ability to come back and thrive. And yet there are people that do it.
Because you can go statistical improbabilities.
Yeah.
Like statistically, it is very improbable that somebody will break a cycle of poverty. And I took some course in college that took the approach of the statistical, really just the stats of how hard it is to do that, and the likelihood that you will be the generation that says, I know that my family has lived in this part of Alabama for 9 generations now, and there's a high likelihood that I will get addicted to some drug, meth, something like that, because that's what everybody historically has done. And but I'm gonna break that cycle, and then you look at this, the odds of that are so low,
right?
It's insane. So you have to work so much harder than a normal person would just to not get addicted to drugs and not continue to live in this weird, not so great suburb of Alabama or whatever.
Right.
Sorry if you're from Alabama. First state that came.
There is a high rate of poverty in rural Alabama, so you're not wrong about that.
So yeah, it just, the stats on that are just staggeringly depressing.
Yeah.
And so I like that we're spending a month and really leaning into this, and you talking about that was
75069.
69.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
mostly McKinney.
Yeah, that is such a weird statistical anomaly that we have these insanely very well off neighborhoods around here. There's one getting built across the street,
right?
And yet there's so many people who can't pay their bills and who are living on the street.
Right.
And just that's mind blowing.
Yeah. I think for all these gospel stories where people are just waiting by pools or otherwise because they don't feel like a lot of hope is coming, if we can be people that provide a glimmer of hope for them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, that's a miracle. And, the other thing about this series I'd love, we're often, even with the very narrow view of miracles, I feel like I had a professor in college say that the worst thing to ever happen was the Enlightenment. And
oh my God.
I would argue,
you've had some insane professors that have said some just shockingly egregious things.
Right? Yeah, she was against the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment for different reasons than you might expect.
Holy moly!
But because the Enlightenment's brought so many great scientific advancements, but in that there was this loss of mystery. So, I'm thinking along the lines of because I was thinking isn't it amazing? I was thinking about all this this technology that literally exoskeletons that allow people with their paralysis to walk again, or we have a guy who's a member of our church who is part of a group that makes glasses for people with a certain kind of blindness to literally be able to see. But then I was thinking about Wi-Fi, and I was thinking about these things that if you were to go ask people 20, 50 years before, would literally be like, oh, I'm carrying the world in my pocket and I can connect. It's just, they are so miraculous when they come out, and then they become so standard that we lose awe. And I wonder if we were driving, I wonder what life would be like if we were driving down the car in an internal combustion engine or electric vehicle, realizing that we're not in a horse and wagon anymore, and be awed that somebody thought of this.
Yeah.
And would we be more joyful about life?
I don't know. I'm still processing that sentence you said where it removed mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is such a profound concept, that something that you don't understand, and so choosing to accept it without understanding it because it clearly exists.
Right.
I think that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a really cool thing. And I would argue though that it didn't remove it, it just shifted it. It took some things away that were mysterious.
Yeah.
And so we get to think bigger.
Right.
We get to think, oh, okay, well, we understand this now, but what about this?
Yeah.
And so I think that would be my reaction to that. Rather than saying it removed it, I would say it just shifted it.
That's true. I think when you look in the area of like quantum physics, one, it's totally mysterious still. Like no one's figured out why one quark can exist over here and another one exists over here, and they have the exact same, like, for lack of a better word, DNA. Like they're exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then the other ones that, like, they disappear here and they reappear over here.
They actually teleport, and we have no idea.
No idea how. So that is true. We probably would not have got to that level of thinking without the rationality of trying to figure out how things work. And that's where I think, like, and granted, I'm not a intellectual scientist necessarily. I pretend I am, but that's where I get to the point of there is a movement of science, and there is my own personal movement of the more that I know how the world works, the more that I'm just in awe that it does.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I think about God.
Neil deGrasse Tyson says often that the things that we are made of are, we're carbon-based beings or whatever, are not rare in the universe. It's all over the place. Right. And so the fact that it's come together the way it has is just so fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and I remember the statistic of we share 77% of our DNA with a banana. And, so obviously there's a big difference in that, like 23% that's different. But then when you look at like a chimpanzee or an ape, there's like 99.7% of our DNA that we share. But that 0.3% makes us significantly different. Yeah. And I think it's amazing how all those things come to play. To me, it doesn't seem just scattershot. And even though I don't think I'll ever be able to put my finger on it, the mystery of it is just awe-inspiring. And I think awe allows us to connect with God.
Well, it's in one of those Methodist things that we will read corporately. And it has that phrase, to proclaim the mystery of faith.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I've always kind of tilted my head at that phraseology of to proclaim the mystery of faith. And I've pondered on that so many times because I'll be in a church service where, we read that. And so I'm reading that, and then I say that out loud, and then I start just really racking my brain, like, what does that mean?
Right.
And so I love the notion of leaning into something that is inherently mysterious because we don't have answers for it.
I think it's beautiful. I'm very comfortable in that space.
I love it. And I think it's nice to embrace that from time to time. I mean, it's not something to dwell on 24/7,
right?
But to really put yourself in a space where you're just like, I do not understand anything that's happening.
Right. Well, and I think just from mystery of faith, from a trust standpoint of, if I can wake up today and I don't feel like I have to control everything by knowing everything, then can I let go a little bit and just experience joy more than having to have my thumbprint on everything?
Ooh, for a control freak, that would be
it'd be rough, but
I must control.
Right? I don't know a lot of control freaks who are the most happy people in the world.
That's true. I would say they're too in the space that, well, just you have to learn how to be okay with not controlling things. Can't control everything.
Right, for sure.
Well, I like that. That's a good closing out spot.
I bet we'll talk about mystery a little bit more in the next couple of weeks as we go through miracles.
Man, I'm going to lean into this one. I like this series a lot. I feel far less compelled to go home and see what candy's in my pantry.
I was going to say, I received a whole lot of Reese's peanut butter cups over the last series. I'm curious how many miracles I'm going to receive this time.
That is entirely your fault because you didn't stop talking about candy, so now you have too much of it.
I really appreciate the generosity of our congregation and the love that I very much felt.
They just wanted you to feel that love.
Yeah, compounded in sugar, chocolate, and peanut butter. It was fantastic. The best way to express love.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah.
Go explore some mystery or something.
That's right.
Yeah. Go read a mystery
novel. See what God's got in store today.
Yeah. All right. Catch you guys next time.
Bye.
Peace.